Understanding Judaism and Zionism, thanks to Israel Shahak's book Jewish History, Jewish Religion, Chapter 5, The Laws Against Non-Jews. As explained in Chapter 3, the Halakha, that is, the legal system of classical Judaism, as practiced by virtually all Jews from the 9th century to the end of the 18th century, and as maintained to this very day in the form of Orthodox Judaism, is based primarily on the Babylonian Talmud. However, because of the unwieldy complexity of the legal disputations recorded in the Talmud, more manageable codifications of Talmudic law became necessary and were indeed compiled by successive generations of rabbinical scholars. Some of these have acquired great authority and are in general use. For these reasons, we shall refer for the most part to such compilations and their most reputable commentaries rather than directly to the Talmud. It is, however, correct to assume that the compilation referred to reproduces faithfully the meaning of the Talmudic text and the additions made by later scholars on the basis of that meaning. The earliest code of Talmudic law, which is still of major importance, is the Mishneh Torah, written by Moses Maimonides in the late 12th century. The most authoritative code, widely used to date as a handbook, is the Shulchan Aruch, composed by Rabbi Yosef Karo in the late 16th century as a popular condensation of his own much more voluminous Beit Yosef, which was intended for the advanced scholar. The Shulchan Aruch is much commented upon. In addition to classical commentaries dating from the 17th century, there is an important 20th century one, Mishnah Berurah. Finally, the Talmudic Encyclopedia, a modern compilation published in Israel from the 1950s and edited by the country's greatest Orthodox rabbinical scholars, is a good compendium of the whole Talmudic literature. Murder and genocide. According to the Jewish religion, the murder of a Jew is a capital offense and one of the three most heinous sins, the other two being idolatry and adultery. Jewish religious courts and secular authorities are commanded to punish, even beyond the limits of the ordinary administration of justice, anyone guilty of murdering a Jew. A Jew who indirectly causes the death of another Jew is, however, only guilty of what Talmudic law calls a sin against the laws of heaven, to be punished by God rather than by man. When the victim is a Gentile, the position is quite different. A Jew who murders a Gentile is guilty only of a sin against the laws of heaven, not punishable by a court. Note: Maimonides' Mishneh Torah, Laws on Murderers, 211, and in the Talmudic Encyclopedia, article Guile. End of note. To cause indirectly the death of a Gentile is not a sin at all. Note: Rabbi Yoel Sirkis Beit Hadash, Commentary on Beit Yosef, Yoreh De'ah, 158. The two rules just mentioned apply even if the Gentile victim is Ger Toshav, that is, a resident alien who has undertaken in front of 3 Jewish witnesses to keep the 7 Noahide precepts, the 7 biblical laws considered by the Talmud to be addressed to Gentiles. End of note. Thus, one of the 2 most important commentators on the Shulchan Aruch explains that when it comes to a Gentile, one must not lift one's hand to harm him, but one may harm him indirectly, for instance, by removing a ladder after he had fallen into a crevice. There is no prohibition here because it was not done directly. Note: Rabbi David Halevi, Poland, 17th century, Turei Zahav on Shulchan Aruch, Yoreh De'ah, 158. End of note. A Gentile murderer. He points out, however, that an act leading indirectly to a Gentile's death is forbidden if it may cause the spread of hostility towards Jews. Note: this concept of hostility will be discussed below. End of note. A Gentile murderer who happens to be under Jewish jurisdiction must be executed whether the victim was Jewish or not. However, if the victim was Gentile and the murderer converts to Judaism, he is not punished. Note: Talmudic Encyclopedia, article Ger, convert to Judaism. End of note. All this has a direct and practical relevance to the realities of the State of Israel. Although the state's criminal laws make no distinction between Jew and Gentile, such distinction is certainly made by the Orthodox rabbis who, in guiding their flock, follow the halakha. Of special importance is the advice they give to religious soldiers. Since even the minimal interdiction against murdering a Gentile outright applies only to Gentiles with whom we, the Jews, are not at war, various rabbinical commentators in the past drew the logical conclusion that, in wartime, all Gentiles belonging to her hostile population may, or even should be, killed. Note: for example, Rabbi Sabtai Cohen, mid-17th century, Siftei Cohen on Shulchan Aruch, Yoreh De'ah, 158. But in times of war, it was the custom to kill them with one's own hands, for it is said, "The best of Gentiles, kill him." Siftei Cohen and Turei Zahav, see note 3, are the 2 major classical commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch. End of note. Since 1973, this doctrine is being publicly propagated for the guidance of religious Israeli soldiers. The first such official exhortation was included in a booklet published by the Central Region Command of the Israeli Army, whose area includes the West Bank. In this booklet, the command's chief chaplain writes, quote, "When our forces come across civilians during a war, or in hot pursuit or in a raid, so long as there is no certainty that those civilians are incapable of harming our forces, then, according to the halakha, they may and even should be killed. Under no circumstances should an Arab be trusted, even if he makes an impression of being civilized. In war, when our forces storm the enemy, they are allowed and even enjoined by the halakha to kill even good civilians, that is, civilians who are ostensibly good. Note: Colonel Rabbi Avidan Zemel, Tohar Haneshech Lekor Halacha, Purity of Weapons in the Light of Halacha, in Beriqvot Milchemet Yom HaKippurim, Pirkei Hagut, Halacha, Umeqar. In the wake of the Yom Kippur War, chapters of meditation, halacha, and research. Central Region Command, 1973. Quoted in Haolam Hazeh, January the 5th, 1974. Also quoted by David Shaham, a chapter of meditation, Chotam, 28 March 1974, and by Amnon Rubinstein, who falsifies the halakha, Ma'arif, October the 13th, 1975. Rubinstein reports that the booklet was subsequently withdrawn from circulation by order of the Chief of General Staff, presumably because it encouraged soldiers to disobey his own orders. But he complains that Rabbi Avidan has not been court-martialed, nor has any rabbi, military or civil, taken exception to what he had written. End of note. The same doctrine is expounded in the following exchange of letters between a young Israeli soldier and his rabbi, published in the yearbook of one of the country's most prestigious religious colleges, Midrashiyat Noam, where many leaders and activists of the National Religious Party and Gush Emunim have been educated. Note: Rabbi Shimon Weiser, Purity of Weapons, an exchange of letters in Niv Hamidrashiyah, Yearbook of Midrashiyat Noam, 1974, page 29 to 31. The yearbook is in Hebrew, English, and French, but the material quoted here is printed in Hebrew only.